أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي.
What is the ruling of the mursal of the Sahabi? We know from Aisha radiallahu anha that the scholars have accepted it, and the reason why I mention Aisha is because she wasn't present when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam first received revelation. But in Sahih Bukhari, in the first chapter, she narrates things about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam receiving revelation when Jibreel first came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the cave, and all those matters related to that. She wasn't there. She wasn't even born at the time. So that shows us that the scholars have accepted the mursal of the Sahabi because the only other source that this companion could have had was another companion, and therefore the issue of the missing link does not apply here. The author then says, وَالثَّالِثُ إِنْ كَانَ بِاثْنَيْنِ فَصَاعِدًا مَعَ التَّوَالِي فَهُوَ الْمُعْضَلُ. So the author discussed missing links at the beginning of the sanad from the side of the compiler, or at the end of the sanad from the side of the companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says, the third, if the lasuna consists in two or more narrations consecutively, then it is the problematic report. Literally, if something is mu'adal, then it is difficult or problematic. And as the author says, if it is linguistically, or rather technically, if it is mu'adal, then it is when there are two or more narrators missing in the particular chain of narration consecutively, neither at the beginning of the sanad nor at the end. Now, we find examples of this, many examples of this in the Muwatta of Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. Imam Malik, many times he says, it reached him, balagani anna Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu qal. It has reached me that Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, he said, للمملوك طعامه وكسوته بالمعروف ولا يكلف من العمل إلا ما يطيقه. That for the slave is upon, meaning a right for the slave upon his master is that he is fed, that he is clothed in that which is well known, that which is proper, and that he is not asked to do any work which he is unable to do. Now, Imam Malik rahimahullah, there are two people between him and Abu Hurairah. How do we know this? Because in other narrations in Sahih Muslim and others, we find that Bukayr ibn Abdullah and Ajlan Mawla Fatima, those are the two missing links between Imam Malik rahimahullah and Abu Hurairah. So we know that there are two missing links. They are consecutive. They are neither at the beginning of the sanad nor at the end. So this is an example of a mu'adal report. It is da'if with this particular chain of narration, but with the hadith is authentic from other chains of narration, like in Sahih Muslim and others. But with this one, where Imam Malik rahimahullah says that it reached me that Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that particular narration, that particular sanad, not the hadith itself, not the wording is authentic, but that sanad is mu'adal, and because there are missing links, that sanad is considered to be weak. Next he says, وَإِلَّا فَالْمُنْقَطِعُ. If not, then it is the broken chained report. If it is not consecutive, if the missing link takes place in any part of the sanad except the beginning and the end, and it is not consecutive, then this is called munqati'. An example of this is the hadith which is narrated by Al-Hajjaj ibn Arta and Abdul Jabbar ibn Wa'il ibn Hujr and Abihi. استكرهت المرأة مرأة على أهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قدرا عنها to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم فدرى عنها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الحد. Hajjaj ibn Arta, he says on the authority of Abdul Jabbar ibn Wa'il ibn Hujr, on the authority of his father Wa'il ibn Hujr, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was approached with a case of a woman who was raped, And because she was raped, the Prophet ﷺ did not punish her the punishment of fornication. Now the problem with this hadith is that Abdul Jabbar did not hear from his father. How do we know this? Because he was born after the death of his father by 6 months. Okay, so there's a missing link, meaning that Abdul Jabbar is basically reporting from the Prophet ﷺ directly, and he's not mentioning, he's mentioning his father as the link, but we know that his father could not have been the link because he was born 6 months after his father passed away, meaning that his mother was pregnant with him, she was 3 months pregnant with him, at least, when his father passed away. So what is the ruling of this particular hadith? It is weak because it has a missing link. The author then goes on and he says, and he divides missing links into 2 more categories. And he says, ثُمَّ قَدْ يَكُونُ وَاضِحًا أَوْ خَفِيًّا. The missing links, they can either be obvious, meaning that scholars can see it, and even the beginner student knows that there is a missing link, or the missing link can be hidden. فالأول يدرك بعدم التلاقي ومن ثم احتيج إلى التاريخ. The first is recognized by lack of meeting. Okay? We know that definitely these 2 scholars did not meet, and the example we just mentioned is an example of an obvious missing link. A saqt, which is definitely Abdul Jabbar ibn Wa'il, could not have heard from his father. Even if you read his biography and you read his father's biography, even the beginner student of hadith can see that there is a missing link. It's very, very obvious. And then the way that we come to this conclusion is to look at it from a historical point of view. We look at the birth dates and the birth of the narrators. We also look at the day that the dates on which they died. We also look at when they traveled and when they returned to their home, and we also look at certain other events that took place. And all of this is looked at from an historical point of view. Now, if we look at the scholars and how they ascertain this, we find that Al-Hakim rahimahullah, he mentions an example of Abu Ja'far al-Kushi, who reports from Abd ibn Humayd. And when this person, Abu Ja'far, was asked, you have narrated from Abd ibn Humayd, the scholars found it to be very strange. So they asked him, when were you born? So he said, I was born in the year 260. So Hakim turned to the rest of the people in the gathering and he says, this man claims to have narrated from Abd ibn Humayd 13 years after his death. So he was able to expose this person, but just by using history, without knowing anything else about this person, Abu Ja'far, except that he was born 13, or that he claims to have heard this from this person 13 years after this person passed away. It's as if someone says, let me give you this example. I never met Sheikh bin Baz or Sheikh Uthaymeen, but if I say that Sheikh Uthaymeen narrated to me and I heard him say, I will only be able to say that truthfully if I say I heard it on one of his tapes. But I cannot say that I sat in his gatherings and he taught me and I was there and I narrated from him. That will be lying. And the scholars, how will they figure out? If I claim that I was a personal student of Sheikh Uthaymeen, meaning I sat at his feet and I didn't hear from him directly, how will the people know that I'm lying? They will say that you got accepted in the year 2000 and you only went to Medina at this particular time, and Shaykh Uthaymin rahimahullah, he passed away before that. Therefore, it's impossible that you could have heard from him directly. Next, the author says, وَالثَّانِي الْمُدَلَّسُ. The second is the camouflaged report. So, firstly, the word mudallas comes from the Arabic word ad-dalas, which means darkness. So there's something dark, if there's some darkness, we call that dalas. And why do we say that it is camouflaged? It's because the defect has been concealed. It's in such a manner that an impression is given, or the impression is given that there is no defect. Okay? And inshallah we'll just talk about, we'll give some examples inshallah. And I think certain examples that that come to mind is the example, for instance, if I said that I heard from Shaykh Uthaymin rahimahullah, and it appears that the possibility was there that I could have actually been one of his personal students. But after careful investigation, I'm exposed, and it seems that I did not hear from Shaykh Uthaymin because I traveled to Saudi Arabia after the death of the Shaykh. وَقَدْ يَرِدُ بِصِيغَةٍ تَحْتَمِلُ اللُّقِي كَعَنْ وَقَالٍ. A report related with a phrase which implies possible meaning such as from so and so and he said. So the Mudallas report is that report in which a Rawi says, I heard from a particular Sheikh. Oh no, he does not say I heard. He says from Sheikh so and so, or he said. And this gives the impression that he heard the hadith and that he reported the hadith directly from the Sheikh. But what he is doing is that he is concealing a defect. The fact that he did not hear this hadith directly from the Sheikh, or the fact that he wants to hide the fact that he did not even meet the Sheikh. So he uses very ambiguous words like an wa qal. He says then وَكَذَا الْمُرْسَلُ الْخَفِيُّ مِنْ مُعَاصِرٍ لَمْ يَلْقَهُ. Likewise, the hidden expedient report from a contemporary he did not meet. Now the difference between Mudallas and Mursal al-Khafi is that the Mudallas, we definitely know that they met. Okay? But in the most common form of Tadlis, there are certain ahadith which he claims to have heard, which he did not hear. And in those ahadith, he uses words from so and said like an and qal. In Mursal al-Khafi, they were contemporaries, but they did not meet. He reports a hadith from someone he did not meet, and that tells us that there's a difference between Mudallas and Mursal al-Khafi. Mursal al-Khafi is when they were contemporaries, but we figure and we find out that they did not meet. He then says, and he moves and he starts and he's about, inshallah, to discuss the second type of the second way in which a report is rejected, and he says ثم الطعن إما أن يكون لكذب الراوي. He says that aspersion, criticism, disparagement of narrators can be one of the following 10 reasons. And before we get into that, inshallah, it is important to know that ghiba, to speak about narrators, is permissible. Inshallah, in lesson number 4, we will continue with this discussion about whether or not criticism of the narrators is permissible or whether it is not. Inshallah, hopefully, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ability to continue, we would do so, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the benefit of these lessons, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cause us to be together again, inshallah, for lesson number 4. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.